Chapter 9, The Core Trauma. Here's a quote from J.Herman, Trauma and Recovery. Atrocities refused to be buried. Folk wisdom is filled with ghosts who refuse to rest in their graves until their stories are told. We had just read atrocities refuse to be buried. Folk wisdom is filled with ghosts who refuse to rest in their graves until their stories are told. J.Herman. Let's put all the pieces of our core language map together. So far, we've learned to extract the core language gems from our core complaint. We've also learned how to analyze our core descriptors, how the adjectives we use to describe our parents often say more about us than they do about them. We've also learned that the sentence that expresses our greatest fear, our core sentence, can lead us back to trauma in our family system. The last thing we need to learn is how to construct the bridge to get our core trauma, the unresolved trauma in our childhood or in the family history. In sequence, the four tools of the core language map are the core complaint, the core descriptors, the core sentence, and the core trauma. There are two ways to unearth the core trauma. One is through a genogram, a diagram of the family tree. The other is through a bridging question. And guess what the next section is called? The bridging question. As we learned from Zach in the last chapter, one way to get the underlying trauma is to ask a bridging question. 130. A bridging question can summon forward the family member from whom we have inherited our core sentence. Because our core sentence can originate in a past generation, locating the rightful owner can bring about peace and understanding, not only for us, but for our children as well. In Zach's case, the bridging question, who in your family committed a crime and was never punished for it, led us to his grandfather, who, as a powerful official in Mussolini's government, harmed many people. As you can imagine, people in Zach's family rarely, if ever, spoke about what grandfather did during the war. Simply put, a bridging question is a question that connects the present to the past. Excavating the feelings of your greatest fear can lead you to the person in your family system who had cause to feel the same way you do. For example, if your greatest fear is that you might harm a child, turn that fear into a question. Think about all the relevant combinations that could express in a fear carried by a descendant in the family. The fear, I could harm a child. Possible bridging questions. Who in your family system might have blamed himself or herself for hurting a child or not keeping a child safe? Who might have held himself or herself responsible for a child's death? Who might have felt guilty for actions or decisions that harmed a child? What child in your family system was harmed, neglected, given away, or mistreated? One or more of these questions is likely to lead you to the source of your fear. However, the source might not always be readily available. Many parents and grandparents keep the family past tightly sealed, and thus valuable information can be lost forever. When people suffer deeply, they often attempt to distance themselves from their emotional pain by avoiding it. In this way, they think that they are protecting themselves and protecting their children. Ignoring the pain actually deepens it. What is hidden from sight often increases in intensity. Remaining silent about family pain is rarely an effective strategy for healing it. The suffering will surface again at a later time, often expressing in the fears or symptoms of a later generation. Just passing that shit down. Even if you can't find out what happened in your family, you can still complete your core language map. Your core sentence will provide you with the clues you need to point out in the direction of a family trauma. Your bridging question will connect enough of the dots, even if the specific details are vague or missing. And now we get into what's called Lisa's story. Let's see what's up with Lisa. Lisa's story. All right, Lisa, what you got? Lisa described herself as an overprotective mother. She was terrified that something terrible would happen to one of her children, and so never let them out of her sight. Even though nothing significant had ever happened to any of Lisa's 3 children, she was haunted by her core sentence: "My child will die." God dang. Lisa knew very little about her family history, but when she followed the fear of her core sentence, she asked the following bridging questions. Who in the family had a child who died? Who in the family could not keep his or her child safe? The only information Lisa had was that her grandparents came to America from the Carpathian Mountain region of Ukraine, fleeing famine and starvation. Her grandparents never spoke about the hardships they endured. The children knew never to ask. Lisa's mother was the youngest of the children and the only one who was born in America. Although Lisa's mother wasn't sure of the details, she suspected that some of the children didn't survive the journey. Just bringing this information to light increased Lisa's understanding of the fear she carried. She recognized that the sentence, "My child will die," most likely belonged to her grandparents, not her. And I could kind of see why it belonged to the grandparents, because it's like, to come that far, it's like, it's not an all or none situation. It's kind of in the middle, like, we have no choice, let's go. It is what it is. Now, making the link of her saying her child will die belonged to her grandparents, making the link immediately reduced the intensity of her fear. Make that link, bro. Lisa was able to worry less and enjoy her children more. When you ask your bridging questions, you could confront a traumatic event in your family that has never been fully resolved. You could find yourself standing face to face with family members who suffered terribly. You could be carrying their fallout. Written exercise number 10, page 132, identifying bridging questions from your core sentence. You can use lines to represent the branches of the family tree, showing who belongs in which generation. List the children of your parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. You do not need to list the children of your aunts, uncles, or siblings. However you map this out will be fine. 2. Next to each family member, represented by a square or circle, yada yada, write down the significant traumas and difficult fates that person experienced. I mean, I kind of get that. Like, you might know of a sibling that lost their first kid. Bam. You might know your parents. What would a kid know? Like, my kid might remember me getting a kidney transplant and being on dialysis for the first 75% of her life. She's still young, but not all kids go through that. You know what I'm saying? Now, aunts and uncles, you might know something that happened. They were in a bad car crash. They had to go through a foreclosure back in 2008, 2009, etc., etc. Grandparents, you might have to ask around. Like, at my grandmother's funeral, I asked my uncle, one of my 3 uncles. We were in the car going we just left the wake. I was like, you know what? I know Grandpa died before I was born, but I don't know how he died. And he was like, he was really sick. He didn't listen to the doctors, yada yada. He chewed tobacco, so he ain't had no teeth, yada yada. But I was like, dang, I didn't know that. But he didn't die of old age, like, peacefully. He was sick, things like that. You know what I'm saying? It'd be a little bit harder on my dad's side, unless maybe I go visit him, take him out to lunch, and be like, tell me something I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it feels like to know more. Look, let me just put it like this. If you're not talking to somebody in your family, man, kill that shit. Kill that pride. Go talk to them. Call them.